Good day and welcome to part 3 of our roundtable discussion. I'm Suki Lee, Vice President of Human Resources for ADP Canada. I'd like to shift us to talk about leadership accountability with respect to the talent agenda. So HR is often seen to own the talent agenda for the organization with respect to delivering the business strategy. But it's not just HR's task anymore. So Les, how do we get all of the C-suite aligned, including the board, to understand their accountability for talent and for organizational culture?
I think the good news is that more and more C-suite executives, the CEO, the CFO in particular, along with the board directors, get it. You know, they recognize with the demographics we're going to have a shortage of talent, and you can't automate. You can't build enough robots to replace us all. So we've got to have great talent in place, and people have to influence that talent and be accountable for it. With CEOs in particular, I think if they are taking the perspective of building a franchise for a long period of time, then it's just not recruiting and developing C-suite executives. It's all the way through the organization. The talent pipeline has to be rich. And if they take a more active role in, let's talk about the supervisors we're bringing into the organization, because some of those supervisors are going to be VPs, and one of them might become a CEO someday. So I'd like to, for me as a CEO, I'd like to see some of that talent coming through the organization. So they're taking ownership for the long-term franchise building. CFOs, they're the ones that have they control the purse strings, and talent development does not come without a cost. And so partnering with the CFO on how we get there is an important relationship. And I'd also say that many CFOs, in particular, are people who aspire to be CEOs. And if you can encourage the CFO to build a kind of a talent master reputation within the organization, it's a lot easier for the rest of the organization to see that individual become the CEO when they have a reputation of working with talent, interested in bringing on great talent, and personally investing in that. And then with the board directors, the good news is most board directors, because they're usually fellow CEOs or they're retired, they've lived through talent shortages, and they recognize it's important for the board to be supportive. And if they can partner with the CEOs, because quite often the CEOs say, I don't want to have the board too involved in my business. There's still a little insecurity there from most CEOs. But I think the great CEOs say, I have several board directors. I'm going to partner with some of my great talent. And it's a great recognition for that talent, that executive, to spend time with a board director. That just adds to their experience base.
Now, Samantha, earlier you talked about leadership and then the concept of followership. So in terms of driving alignment around the talent agenda and organizational culture, how does that work with followership?
With leadership, I would say anybody who steps into a leadership role has an accountability to focus on talent and to focus on optimizing talent. That's part of the leadership role, regardless of where you are in the organization. But those who are stepping into their followership role, we have an obligation in that regard to optimize our own talent, to understand what our strengths are, to bring them to bear as often as possible in that capacity, to understand how we're doing, seek feedback, etc. So I'm definitely of the proponent that everyone in an organization has a responsibility to optimize talent and to optimize the environment where talent can thrive and flourish.
Now, Nora, what about you? You talked about the concept of the whole person. What should leaders be doing in that regard?
I think the key piece that needs to have some focus is around relationships. So historically, it was all about roles. So you do this, I do that. Managers were responsible for filling in or enforcing rules. It was very much a hierarchical relationship. Now managers are part of the team. They're there to nurture and to create environments where people can really thrive. And the only way to do that successfully is in those relationships to recognize that people bring their whole selves to work and that they have gifts and talents and interests and priorities that are both within the workplace, within their career, within their job, but also outside. And we're seeing that particularly in younger generations where they're interested in community involvement, community investment, environment, as well as having their own personal needs and obligations and commitments in family or friends in terms of care or nurturing or just being a part of a group or having outside interests. So I think the leaders that recognize that there's all this potential and possibility within their grasp and focus on the key relationships, I think are the ones that are going to be most successful.
Okay, now Mark, I know you also encourage us to think holistically about talent. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I think I think that's really important that you think about it holistically. As HR professionals, we have all of these different tools available to us, but in my view, if you look at those in isolation, they're never going to really fulfill the value that they have for an organization or an individual. So I think you have to take a very integrated, holistic approach when you're thinking about performance management, talent management, succession planning, potential, the list goes on and on. So for me, I think there's three things that really ensure that through a holistic approach that you're successful. The first for me would be alignment with the business strategy and with the executive team around where your priorities are. I think the second one is really equipping your leaders to ensure that they're able to really implement those programs in the right way. And the third one, I think, as Sam would have said, I think is really ensuring that there's a level of accountability on the individual to also take responsibility for not just their own talent, but I like also the thought of optimizing the talent across the whole organization as well. So I think with those three components, you can start to really think about talent holistically and ensure that it is more applicable to what is a changing workforce.
This is the end of our third chapter. Please be sure to watch the rest of this roundtable discussion.